Hey guys, tonight we're traveling way back, like incense and chamber pots back, to discover what getting high really meant in medieval times. You're not strutting into a velvet-trimmed opium den or popping gummies behind a tavern. No. You're walking barefoot through alley smoke and candle haze, breathing deep in a world where relaxation came from herbs, not hashtags. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love knowing where you're tuning in from as we drift through the weird corners of history together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into a dim medieval bathhouse, steam curling up from giant copper cauldrons, torchlight flickering across damp stone walls, and someone is definitely humming in Latin. It's cozy in a soggy kind of way. You smell rosemary, maybe a touch of lavender, or is that crushed mugwort? Your nostrils flare like a curious hound, but the real kicker? The air is thick with a sweet, cloying smoke from a brazier in the corner, where someone's tossing powdered frankincense over hot coals like they're seasoning a medieval salad. You cough politely and shuffle closer. The bathhouse is not just a place to wash. It's a hub for healing, socializing, and let's be honest, chilling out in the most medieval way possible. You settle into a shallow stone tub filled with lukewarm water and floating herbs. Mint leaves tickle your skin. A woman next to you dips a bundle of chamomile flowers into the water and leans her head back. No spa playlist needed. Just distant bells and some guy snoring through a face full of valerian. Valerian root, by the way, was a favorite back then. Not just for sleep, it was the medieval answer to "my anxiety has anxiety." Ground, steeped, smoked, even eaten raw if you were desperate. You might not float into enlightenment, but you definitely stop caring about the rat the size of a loaf of bread scuttling under your bench. Let's not forget wormwood, the bitter backbone of absinthe centuries later. Here in the bathhouse, it's dried and bundled into a steamy cloth to open the mind and maybe help with your back pain. The line was always blurry. A young boy runs through the mist waving a bundle of burning herbs. He's probably paid to purify the air, but judging by your increasingly floaty feeling, it's also acting as the medieval version of a hot-boxed hallway. You try to focus, but the flickering torches start to smear into glowing orange halos. You lean back, sigh, and blink slowly. Some patrons add resinous myrrh into the fire for a more introspective atmosphere. Myrrh doesn't just smell holy. It was thought to ward off disease and evil spirits. But it also makes everything feel dreamlike. A whisper across the bathhouse. Did you feel that tremor? No, Karen, that's just your knees dissolving into the bench. In the corner, two older women whisper over a little iron pot of herbs. You catch henbane and fennel. One of them sprinkles something into a cloth pouch and tucks it under her neck like a herbal neck pillow from hell. Henbane, just a whiff too much, and you'll be hallucinating that the bishop is actually a turnip with legs. Don't ask how they found that out. Trial, error, screaming. And here's your medieval reality check. You probably wouldn't survive this place if you had asthma, open wounds, or were allergic to mold. The relaxing smoke includes animal dung fuel, bits of sulfur, and whatever that guy just coughed into the coals. But hey, at least you're not in the stocks. Yet. You feel your muscles loosen as steam thickens. Someone offers you a bowl of herbal tea made from meadowsweet and ground ivy. You pretend you know what that is. It tastes vaguely like hay and dishwater, but it's oddly calming. A man shuffles past carrying a stoneware jug and muttering about unicorn root and wild lettuce. Unicorn root, spoiler, not from unicorns. Wild lettuce, meanwhile, is the medieval equivalent of sipping cough syrup and hoping for the best. Historians still argue whether medieval folks knew how intoxicating some of these herbs really were, or if they just liked how sleepy they made you feel after a long day dodging plague and paying taxes with chickens. A low chant starts in the next room, where the more pious types inhale incense in near silence. The smoke from burning laudanum resin curls through a carved doorway. You breathe in and just for a second forget where your limbs are. A woman nearby lets out a giggle that sounds half demonic, half satisfied. You start to wonder if everyone's experiencing the same bathhouse, or if you're all in your own herbal universes right now. Did we mention that medieval people genuinely believed certain fumes could carry you closer to God, or at least farther from lice? Elevating the spirit could mean prayer, sleep, or just drifting into a fragrant stupor under candlelight. The line between sacred and stoned, very, very fuzzy. A bath attendant taps you on the shoulder and asks if you'd like to try the dream pillow. You nod. He hands you a cloth bag filled with hops, crushed rose petals, marjoram, and, yup, yet more valerian. You press it to your face. It smells like a spice cabinet had a panic attack. But slowly, your eyelids grow heavy. People didn't call this getting high. They called it prayer, rest, medicine, relaxation. But your brain is currently moonwalking across the rafters. As the bathhouse quiets, someone murmurs a prayer to St. Hildegard of Bingen, the original herbal influencer. She claimed the scent of certain herbs could open the soul. Others say she might have just inhaled too much wild celery while composing her chants. Either way, the vibe is immaculate. And just as you start to drift, someone knocks over a brazier. Sparks fly. A sheepish sorry echoes. You open one eye. You're still here? Still soaking. Still a little floaty. But no worries. There's a lot more medieval tripping to come. You shuffle out of the bathhouse barefoot, your skin wrinkled, hair damp, and brain just a little slow, like bread dough that's almost ready to bake. The night air bites softly against your cheeks, and then someone offers you a drink. It's in a wooden cup, slightly sticky. The liquid inside is golden, bubbly, and smells like honey that got tired of being sweet. Mead. The medieval OG of getting tipsy. But this isn't your modern craft brew hipster mead. It's stronger, funkier, and possibly fermented in a goat's stomach for depth. You take a cautious sip. It's sweet, sure, but with a spicy, earthy kick. There's something else in there. You swirl it, watching bits of mushroom float and spin. Not the regular forest kind. This is the secret batch. Fly agaric. Bright red caps with white dots. The fairy tale mushrooms. Yes, those mushrooms. Fly agaric isn't subtle. In small doses, it's a little dizzying. In larger doses, well, medieval shamans and berserkers claim to see through time, or at least through their own faces. Historians still argue whether people actually use these mushrooms for visions or just accidentally tripped while foraging. Either way, you're feeling a little swirly. You followed the cup's previous owner into a gathering near a fire pit. Peasants, merchants, even one or two barefoot friars with their robes hiked up. The air is warm with the scent of roasting meat, pine sap, and ale spilled into the dirt. A jug passes hand to hand. This time it's braggot, an ale-mead hybrid, often spiced with herbs like yarrow or rosemary, and sometimes a little belladonna if someone wanted to make the night extra theatrical. You sip again. Your lips tingle. Not in a romantic way, in a maybe I just drank a hallucination kind of way. A jester dances near the fire, twirling with bells on his shoes and a slightly deranged look in his eye. Was it the drink? The heat? Or that time he accidentally snacked on the moldy rye loaf? That's coming later, don't worry. Back to your cup. It's refilled before you can protest, this time with Groot Ale. Hops weren't always the main ingredient. Before hops took over the beer world, brewers used a mix called Groot, a blend of herbs with names like bog myrtle, horehound, and sweet gale. Sounds like a Hogwarts greenhouse, but this stuff could pack a punch. Especially if the brewer got creative. Or reckless. A local brewer sits beside you and explains his theory. If the Lord hadn't wanted us to feel dizzy, he wouldn't have made yarrow bloom in spring. You nod solemnly, though you're not entirely sure what he said. Your fingers feel fuzzy. Your toes. Definitely somewhere else. Someone strums a lute. A goat sneezes. And the stars above you start to shimmer like they've been polished. You lie back in the grass, wondering if this is what nobility feels like. But let's talk about them for a second. The nobles. Turns out fancy folks didn't just rely on wine. No, they had their own special blends, often imported from southern Europe. Spiced wines known as hippocras were laced with cinnamon, cloves, ginger, and sometimes substances that don't appear in modern recipe books. Mandrake root, for instance, might show up now and then, and while it wasn't guaranteed to cause hallucinations, it definitely made you feel like your brain had taken off its shoes and was walking around barefoot in your skull. Some parties even featured wine infused with saffron, not for the taste, but because it made your skin glow and supposedly warded off evil. Side effect? A whole lot of giggling and spontaneous declarations of sainthood. You remember hearing about the drunken courts, where nobles debated philosophy, poetry, and which bird was secretly a spy sent by the devil. Swans were high on the suspect list. You're not surprised. And then there's crafter's grog. Less elegant, more unpredictable. Artisans and blacksmiths sometimes brewed their own drinks using whatever was around. Pine needles, old bread, apples that had seen better centuries. One blacksmith claimed his drink gave him visions of perfect iron. He also fell into a river and declared it sacred. Back to the fire. Someone's passing a leather pouch now, not a drink, but a chew. Fermented barley mash, left to sour and wrapped in mint leaves. It numbs your tongue and makes your jaw feel like it's on vacation. A boy nearby starts singing a drinking rhyme about a baker who saw angels after sipping cloudy cherry beer. You wonder how many of these songs are just coded trip reports. Historians still argue whether these psychoactive ingredients were added with intent, or if medieval drinkers just had a really, really high tolerance for whoops. One thing's clear, getting buzzed wasn't always about escaping. Sometimes it was about connecting. To your neighbors, to the land, to the divine. Or, let's be real, to the ground after your third goblet of mushroom mead. You blink slowly as a monk sits beside you. He offers a sip from his own jug, marked with a single black symbol. You hesitate. He smiles, says it's made with holy rye. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. May open the door to visions, or just gas. You drink. Your vision darkens at the edges like a medieval vignette. The stars seem closer now, like tiny candles in a dark cathedral. A warm fuzz wraps around your shoulders, though you're certain no one put a cloak on you. The laughter around the fire stretches and wobbles like wax under heat. Someone claps in slow motion. You lie back and let the drink do the talking. Tomorrow your head will hurt. You'll question your life choices. You'll swear off mushrooms for a while, but for now, you're in the moment. Warm, weird, and drifting sideways through a festival where everything tastes like moss and memory. And somewhere nearby, someone's about to bring out the moldy rye bread. You don't know it yet, but things are about to get a lot more interesting. You're awake, but not quite. Your head hums like a lute string after a strong pluck, and your tongue feels like it's been dipped in flour. The fire's gone out. Someone's left you with a blanket made from something that might once have been a curtain, and the stars are now being slowly erased by dawn. Then, oh no, someone hands you a piece of bread. At first it looks innocent. Dense, dark, rough-edged. Smells like grain, sweat, and maybe regret? You take a bite because refusing food in medieval times could be a social crime. It's chewy, a little sour, a little bitter, a little off. You don't know it yet, but you've just ingested ergot, a fungus that sometimes grew on rye when storage conditions were bad, which was always. Ergot is a real overachiever when it comes to effects. In tiny amounts, it might help with migraines or aid labor pains. In larger amounts, it can make you see God, or the devil, or your neighbor's goat singing psalms. Monks used to eat this kind of bread without knowing what it was doing to them. Visions of angels? Divine ecstasy? Fiery torment? Sure, those might have been holy experiences. Or just lunch gone wrong. You stumble a bit. That tree looks like it's breathing. That cloud? Definitely shaped like a screaming bishop. Your heart races and slows in confusing patterns. Someone hands you water and says, "Drink slow," but their face is doing a little tango, so you're not sure they're trustworthy. Historians still argue whether ergot was ever consumed intentionally to create spiritual experiences, or whether everyone just accepted that bread sometimes made you see flaming horses. You find yourself walking with a small group of people in brown robes. They hum softly. One of them carries a staff shaped like a key. "We are seekers," he says, "of light and rye." They invite you to a monastery on a hill where the windows are tall and narrow and the silence is thicker than the soup. Inside, a scribe scratches Latin onto parchment while gently rocking back and forth. He's mumbling about the color blue tasting like forgiveness. Welcome to the home of the mystics. Some religious communities believed in pushing the body to unlock the soul. Fasting, isolation, hours of chanting, exposure to incense smoke that would knock out a modern house cat, all of it aimed at breaking the boundaries of ordinary thought. Sometimes they slipped things into the wine. Other times the bread did the work. You sit cross-legged near the altar. The walls shimmer like heat waves. A mosaic of saints blinks at you. Probably. One monk whispers that Saint Teresa had visions of fire and flight. Another mentions Hildegard of Bingen again, composer, philosopher, herbalist. She spoke of divine light and cosmic eggs. Scholars debate whether she was divinely inspired or tripping absolute medieval balls on contaminated grain and flour extracts. Maybe both. She was very productive. You're offered angel wine. It smells like vinegar and lavender with a hint of something earthy. Maybe poppy, maybe something from under the altar. You sip. The chanting deepens, or your hearing is changing gears. The walls pulse. Your feet are hot. The stone beneath you feels like it's breathing. A monk drapes a damp cloth over your head and calls it the Shroud of Stillness. You call it wet. But you lean into it anyway. You close your eyes and drift through golden fields of rye that whisper your name. A chicken greets you in Latin. You accept this. Somewhere a bell rings 13 times. When you open your eyes, you're lying in a small side chamber with high windows and dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. Someone placed lavender under your pillow. There's a painting of the Virgin Mary on the wall, but she's smiling at you like she knows you've just done a little chemical time travel. A monk enters with a bowl of porridge. You refuse politely. He chuckles and takes a bite himself, then immediately walks into the doorframe and blesses it. Welcome to a world where the line between divine revelation and food poisoning is blurry at best. You're not hallucinating, you're on a pilgrimage, a journey into the unknowable. Or maybe just into a poorly regulated bakery. Remember that jester from the fire? Turns out he used to be a monk too. Ate too much blessed bread and started reciting scripture backwards while juggling hot coals. Now he just tours villages with his haunted puppet and a song about St. Margaret wrestling a dragon made of cheese. The church didn't always condemn these experiences. Sometimes they celebrated them, as long as you didn't contradict doctrine or bark like a dog in the middle of Mass. That got complicated. The monks help you to your feet. Your legs wobble, but your mind feels oddly clear. Lighter. Like a door's been opened and nobody's in a rush to close it. You look back at the monastery as you walk downhill, the sun rising behind it like a glowing yolk. You whisper a thank you, not entirely sure to whom. You're not done, though. There's a shadow behind the next village. An herb seller with a box full of strange powders and glistening seeds. You're about to learn that monks weren't the only ones who dealt in visions. The path winds down from the monastery, and with each step, your mind slowly stitches itself back together. You pass a shepherd humming to his sheep, a woman drying herbs on a lattice roof, and a boy chasing a chicken that absolutely does not want to be chased. The village here is quieter, smaller, and somehow warmer. But there's a smell in the air, sharp, minty, bitter underneath. Something brewing. You follow your nose. It leads you past a baker, a blacksmith, and finally, into a crooked alley where the air gets thick and strange. There, wedged between a tanner's, shop, and a pigsty, is a door painted deep green with the word Physica etched in faded Latin script. You knock. The door creaks open before your hand lands a second time. A woman in her 40s with ink-stained fingers and a necklace of dried thistle eyes you up and down. You don't look sick, she says, stepping aside to let you in. But you look curious. That's close enough. The air inside hits you like a velvet pillow of smells. Dried orange peel, musty books, honey, and something that might be mold but also might be yesterday's potion still simmering. The room is lined with jars, rows upon rows, each labeled in beautiful, impossible-to-read script. Tiny pouches hang from the rafters, dried poppies, strung henbane, a basket of withering datura blossoms curled like secrets. She introduces herself only as Mistress Elson. She is not technically a doctor, but in a world where the nearest university is guarded by monks who think sneezing is demonic, Elson is close enough. She opens a drawer with a soft click, a drawer she calls the sleep corner. Inside, tiny glass vials, bundles of crushed leaves, dried flowers, powdered roots. She lifts one and waves it under your nose. The smell is earthy, sweet, and almost spicy. Opium, she says, but not for battle wounds. This one's for the kind of pain you can't point to on the body. Opium from poppy seeds wasn't uncommon in the medieval world, especially among those who traded with southern merchants. Crude preparations like laudanum, not the Victorian tincture, but older, grittier versions, were used for sleep, spiritual trances, or just to make the day seem less medieval. You don't try it yet. She shows you another. Crushed mandrake, harvested at midnight under a new moon. More myth than medicine, she admits, but some folks swear by the dreams. Then comes henbane. Tricky, smoky, and not to be trifled with. Just a little makes your vision dance. Too much, and you'll wake up talking to your shoes in fluent goat. Historians still argue whether herbalists like Elson were healers, chemists, or proto-pharmacologists, or simply good listeners with a wild garden and no oversight. She hands you a cloth pouch tied with red thread. Inside, dried mugwort and clary sage. She tells you to put it under your pillow. It helps the soul wander, she says with no trace of irony, especially when the body can't. But you're more interested in the back shelf, the drawer with no label. She notices, smiles. That one's not for sleep, it's for slipping. Inside is a mix she calls Smoke of the Red Moon. Wormwood, yew bark, powdered toadstool, and something you swear looks like cinnamon. She adds a pinch to a tiny bronze censer, lights it, and fans the smoke gently toward you. It smells wrong. Metallic and sweet at once. Like burnt sugar stirred with a knife. But then, images. The shadow of a bird in your peripheral vision. A memory from childhood, your real childhood, drifting in from nowhere. You sit, uninvited, on her wooden stool. Elson says nothing. She just watches. Time is folding like dough. The room dims and brightens. Her voice comes through a fog. People don't come here for healing. They come to forget, or to feel, or to chase something they dreamed once and never found again. You nod, not because you understand, but because you feel like you should understand. She shows you her notebook. Not a Bible, not a grimoire, but something in between. Lists of herbs, notes on reactions, symbols drawn beside plant names. Some plants are circled in red. Datura, thornapple. aconite. She warns you, these are poison to fools and passageways to the careful. You ask her why she keeps such things if they're so dangerous. She looks at you, and for the first time her voice is quiet. Because pain doesn't care about laws and dreams. Dreams don't ask for permission. You're not sure if that's wisdom or just very poetic herbalism, but it sticks with you. As you leave, she hands you a small linen pouch. Just dried lavender, rose, and vervain, she swears. But there's a wink. You tie it to your belt. You walk out into sunlight blinking, your head lighter and your breath scented faintly of bitter root. It wasn't a tavern, it wasn't a monastery, it wasn't an accident. This was intentional. A peek behind the curtain of medieval mind expansion. A place where symptoms and spirits were treated with the same toolkit. And while you may not have touched the poppy or smoked the moon blend, something has changed. You look down at your hands. They still feel like yours, that's good. But they also feel more awake somehow. And just as you start wondering what else the Middle Ages have stashed behind ordinary doors, you hear something. A story about witches, flying, naked, covered in ointment, riding broomsticks through the night sky. You don't even blink. Of course you're going there next. You don't ask for directions. You just follow the gossip. Word spreads fast in medieval villages, especially when it involves nighttime flights, naked silhouettes against the moon, and ointments made from roots no one dares grow in daylight. You cross through a grove that smells like sage and secrets, and the trees seem to lean in a little closer than usual. It's nearly dusk when you reach the edge of a clearing. A circle of stones marks the ground like a forgotten chessboard. Nearby, a crooked hut leans against a gnarled tree as though it's had one too many potions. Smoke curls out of the chimney in slow spirals, lazy and deliberate. This is where the witches live, allegedly. You're not scared, just extra respectful of where you step. The woman who answers the door isn't wearing black. She's not green-skinned or cackling. She's barefoot, smeared with ash, and humming a tune you've never heard, but instantly trust. She introduces herself as Sybil. Not her name, she says. Her role. She invites you in. No broom in sight, but the floor is lined with herbs you can't name. Hanging from the rafters are bundles of thorny leaves, bone charms, and small cloth dolls with poppy seed eyes. Then she pulls out the jar. You don't even ask what's in it. You know, witch's flying ointment. It's a salve. Thick, oily, dark green. Smells like crushed pine, mushrooms, and maybe fear. She stirs it with a curved bone. This, she says, is what they claim lets us fly. Now, let's pause for a reality check. Historians still argue whether medieval witches actually believed they flew, or whether that was just what inquisitors wrote after a long day of creative questioning. But the ingredients in many surviving flying ointment recipes? Let's just say they didn't produce ordinary dreams. Henbane, belladonna, mandrake, dodera, all of them packed with tropane alkaloids, the kind that mess with your nervous system and reality at the same time. Rub that into your skin, especially, well, sensitive areas, and you're not flying in the sky. You're launching out of your own brain. The ointment wasn't usually ingested, it was absorbed. Applied under the arms, behind the knees, and, according to the certain scandalous accounts, using broomsticks in places no one in polite company should mention. Which explains the stories. You ask Sybil how she makes hers. She just grins. Old recipe, she says. Passed down from women who saw too much and wanted to see more. She invites you to try it. You hesitate. You've eaten strange bread, smoked stranger roots, and nearly passed out in a monastery, but this feels different. Sacred? Dangerous? Fun. She smears a small amount onto your wrists. The texture is slick, the smell complicated. Warm, earthy, just a hint of something peppery. At first, nothing happens. Then the air thickens. The hearth fire doesn't flicker, it dances. Shadows lean toward you like curious children. Your hands feel twice as large. Or maybe the room is shrinking. Or you are. Sybil sits beside you, whispering something, though you can't catch the words. You close your eyes and you're flying. Not with wings, with thought. Your body slumps against the wall, but your mind races through clouds, ducking under constellations, skimming the edges of midnight. Trees below look like feathers. The moon sings, off-key but heartfelt. You land in a field where women are dancing in slow circles. They wear flower crowns and nothing else. Their skin glows faintly blue. One offers you a goblet. You drink and taste every memory you've forgotten since childhood. Then suddenly, you're back. Sweating, heart pounding, eyes wide. Sybil nods. You did well. Some don't come back with their names. You don't speak. Not for a while. She hands you a damp cloth and a piece of apple. You chew slowly, the crunch grounding you. Your hands are your own again. Your feet are dirty. Your mind, though, not quite whole. Witchcraft in the medieval mind wasn't just hexes and love potions. It was a way to connect with power, especially for women with no other form of authority. And when the herbs kicked in, they felt that power. The church wasn't amused. Flying ointments were part of trial confessions, usually extracted through less than gentle methods. But the descriptions they gave? Consistent. Night rides, sabbats, animal transformations, sex with forest spirits. Historians still debate hallucinations under stress, shared folk rituals, mass psychological suggestion, or maybe just a really effective blend of psychoactive plants and desperate imagination. You don't ask Sibyl about devils or demons. She's too calm, too human. Instead, you ask if she's afraid. Not of flying, she says. Just of forgetting how. As you leave, she hands you a charm. A tiny pouch filled with clary sage, thyme, and a single crow feather. For dreams, she says. Not all journeys require ointment. You tuck it away, heart still fluttering from whatever just happened. Behind you, her door shuts with a soft click, and the smoke curls upward again. No broomsticks, no bubbling cauldron, just one woman, some plants, and a whole other world humming just beneath the skin. And as you make your way back down the path, the moon catches you in the corner of its eye and winks. The stars are still out when you wander into the next village, but the mood has shifted. Less dream, more drumbeat. Less herbs and whispers, more sandals on stone, creaking leather armor, and the faintest scent of salt and sweat lingering from a distant shore. You've arrived just in time for a returning feast. Crusaders home from the Holy Land. Their stories come first, as they always do. Of battles in burning heat, of holy relics and lost comrades, of miracles and monsters. But beneath the usual war tales is something else. Something quieter. Smuggled between the lines of honor and piety, substances, powders, scents, curiosities they don't show to the bishop. You find yourself seated near one of them, older, sun-wrinkled, with scars down one arm and a necklace made from beads that don't look quite European. He pulls out a tiny wooden box and opens it slowly. Inside, nestled in linen, is a dark, sticky resin. Hashish. He breaks off a corner, grinds it with his knife hilt, and mixes it into a bit of sweet wine. Offers it to you without a word. You pause. He shrugs. The Saracens use it for prayer, or laughter, or both. You sip. It's bittersweet, earthy. The texture clings to your tongue like beeswax. Then warmth. Slow, creeping warmth that settles into your chest like sunlight pouring through a stained glass window. You blink once, twice. The room brightens slightly, colors deepening like fresh ink on vellum. Laughter feels louder. Your limbs feel quieter. A dog you didn't notice before is now napping under your feet, possibly humming. Crusaders didn't just bring back trinkets and trauma. They brought stories, spices, strange habits. Hashish, made from the compressed resin of the cannabis plant, was known across the Middle East long before it ever reached European mouths. Historians still argue whether returning soldiers adopted the practice out of curiosity reverence, or simple homesickness for something that dulled the edges of memory. Some records call it holy incense, others, the leaf of forgetfulness. You stand and walk slowly, like your body is floating just a half-inch above the ground. The crusader follows, chuckling. He points out others, one knight chewing on a green-stained leaf, a young squire grinding something into his pipe. You've stumbled into a whole subculture of semi-secret experimentation. Back then, there were no TikToks of my first hashish trip or Instagram reels from Jerusalem. Spice markets, knowledge passed quietly, mouth to ear, bag to hand. Sometimes the only written record was a badly translated recipe scribbled in the margins of a psalter. Some monks tried to document these new drugs, but cautiously. One Dominican friar wrote of a golden smoke that unbinds the spirit, while another warned against eastern devils that ride inside green oil. Interpret that as you will. You wander further into the camp. A merchant, maybe Genoese, maybe Venetian, shows you a pouch of crushed lotus petals. Used by dancers, he says, and dreamers. You breathe it in. The scent is soft, powdery, and vaguely metallic. No immediate effect, just a tingle behind the eyes. Later, you sit beside a group of pilgrims huddled around a small hookah-like contraption. The setup is crude, just a clay bowl, reeds, and wet cloth, but the scent pouring from it is unmistakably exotic. Spicy, sweet, with a whisper of charcoal. You're invited to inhale, and when you do, your thoughts slow down like syrup on cold bread. Time itself begins to lean sideways. The fire doesn't dance, it glides. Someone starts singing and you see the notes drift upward, glowing like fireflies. You hear someone say the word assassins in a hushed voice, not in fear, in awe. The Hashashin, that shadowy sect from Persia, often get lumped into the same smoky corner. According to legend and very unreliable sources, they used hashish in ritual preparation before carrying out deadly missions. Truth? Maybe not. But the name stuck, and so did the fascination. Did European elites pick up these habits? Absolutely, in private, behind curtains, while publicly preaching temperance and virtue. The usual. Some noble households began keeping foreign physicians on retainer, men who could blend a bit of hashish with saffron and rose oil, crafting small sweets they claimed cured melancholy. Whether they cured anything is unclear, but no one complained about the side effects. The line between medicine and recreation was non-existent. If something made you feel better, it was divine. If it made you feel too good, it was suspicious. But either way, it made the rounds. You find yourself stretched out on a woven mat, gazing up at stars. That seemed to echo. Someone nearby is telling a story, words tumbling slowly like pebbles down a gentle slope. He says there are deserts in the east where the air tastes like cinnamon, and wandering mystics sip from clay cups filled with hashish tea to see the thoughts of God. You think you'd like that. The warmth inside you hums. Your fingers twitch like they're trying to write poetry you haven't learned yet. The moon hangs low and wide, a full silver coin just for you. The crusader pats your shoulder and says, "You'll come back to yourself soon, but not quite the same." He's right. And as you drift towards sleep or something close to it, you realize this was never about getting high. Not in the modern sense, it was about reaching sideways. Beyond fear, beyond pain, beyond the grayness of everyday medieval life. Whether with herbs, smoke, or oils from faraway lands, people sought the same thing we do now. A break. A breath. A better dream. The night fades gently as you stir, wrapped in someone's discarded cloak, beneath a sky just starting to smudge with light. The crusaders have quieted, their stories dissolved into snores and half-mumbled prayers. Your mouth tastes like resin and raisins, and your head hums. Not unpleasantly, just sideways. And what better way to round out a hashish haze than with a medieval banquet? You hear music drifting from the village's central hall. It's not the harp and angelic choir variety, it's foot stomping, drum thumping, pipe shrieking joy. You follow the rhythm and step inside a timber-framed feast hall so alive it might be breathing. The place is packed. Banners dangle like sleepy tongues from the rafters. Roasted meat glistens on long tables. Spoons clatter. Someone is arguing with a cheese wheel. And the air is thick with wine, sweat, wax, and a barely noticeable herbal undertone. Not accidental. You sit. A plate is shoved in front of you before you can decline. Stewed lentils, rabbit pie, and little tarts, filled with something red and sweet that looks innocent but smells spicy. The lord of the manor, a red-faced man with too many rings and too few manners, raises his goblet and calls for Hippocras. Ah, yes, the medieval party starter. Hippocras is wine made with sugar and spices. Cinnamon, ginger, grains of paradise. No, really. Maybe some nutmeg if the cook was feeling rich. But this batch has a twist. It's thickened with syrup, darkened with fig paste, and laced, quietly but deliberately, with a touch of mandrake extract. You sip. The flavor hits hard. Warm, sweet, spicy, then a tail end of something else. Your tongue tingles. Your heartbeat stumbles, catches itself, then decides to keep going. Mandrake's no joke. A little can relax you. A bit more can knock you out. A bit more, and you're hearing Latin backwards and complimenting the roast pig on its eyebrows. But it's not just the wine. Look at the desserts. The tiny tarts. They're made with rosewater, honey, and dried nightshade berries. Supposed to encourage lust. Or maybe just make your dreams weirder. One man bites into one and immediately starts composing a love song to his spoon. Historians still argue whether noble chefs deliberately use psychoactive ingredients in their cooking, or if it was just a culinary side effect of living in a time where no one really measured anything. Let's be honest, a pinch of belladonna is a pretty wild guess. You catch sight of a roasted swan glazed in something glimmering. Decorative, right? Maybe, but that shiny glaze could be sugar, or it could be powdered columbine, added for aroma and mental sparkle. You wish that were a joke. A juggler enters and begins to twirl knives while reciting poetry. He's clearly had some Hippocras, possibly also some wormwood ale. Then someone hands around little candied comfits, small sugar-coated seeds to freshen the breath. These aren't your average fennel sweets. Someone's added crushed valerian root to a few. You eat one. The flavor blooms with lavender and something that reminds you of socks. You blink slowly. Your shoulders melt. And now the musicians have changed tempo. Faster. Swirling. Someone leaps onto the table. No one objects. In fact, it seems encouraged. A group begins spinning, hand in hand, faces lit by torchlight and wine. You feel it too. This feverish cheer, this bubbling surge just beneath the skin. You're not drunk. You're elevated. Feasts in the medieval world were as much about spectacle as sustenance. And when you didn't have Netflix, indoor plumbing, or deodorant, you made up for it with extra. Especially if you had a pantry full of spices and a monk who owed you a favor at the apothecary. The feast has its rules, though. Somewhere between the third and fourth course, a servant pours water over your hands, fragrant with lavender and marjoram. It's a moment of pause, a reset. And then comes the cheese. Ah, the cheese. Soft, spongy rounds drizzled with honey and flecked, with what appears to be crushed blue flowers. A local delicacy, apparently. But you've heard whispers that those blue petals, they come from a patch of morning glory vines behind the priory, seeds of which, when steeped, can cause visions vivid enough to make a tapestry come alive and criticize your outfit. You try a nibble. It's fine. Then you blink, and the Lord's banners above seem to flutter in a pattern that says, "Breathe slower." The woman beside you chuckles. It's not the cheese, she says. It's the moment. Right. Still, you skip the second piece. Later, as the fire dims and the revelers drift toward carpets and cushions and poorly lit hallways, you find yourself alone on a balcony. The night air is sharp again, cutting through the haze. The moon's back, silent, enormous, watching. Did anyone else notice? That the hippocras was spiced too strongly? That the candied seeds numbed the tongue? That the cheese sang? Or was that just you? These banquets, these strange feasts, they weren't just indulgent. They were curated. Moments of controlled chaos. Culinary theater seasoned with enough folklore, botany, and mild danger to turn every noble into an experimental psychonaut in a velvet robe. And as you lean on the cold stone rail, watching a knight kiss a tree goodnight, you realize the party was never about the food. It was about freedom, from sorrow, from rules, from the dull scrape of daily life. With the right spice, the right wine, the right whisper from a kitchen maid who knew her roots, one could touch something more. And lucky you, you just did. By morning, the feast hall is a battlefield of overturned goblets, snoring bodies, and one confused goose wearing a crown. You step carefully over a snoring minstrel and into the sunlight, face tingling from laughter you didn't remember having. You've tasted the noble life, velvet highs and saffron hangovers. But now you're craving something quieter. You follow a path into the countryside. The noise fades, the air freshens, and eventually you come upon a small stone chapel nestled beside a river, humble and half swallowed by ivy. The bells are silent. Inside, a single candle burns. You slip inside. It's cool, damp, and smells like beeswax and old prayers. There are no crowds here, no musicians, no spiced wine. Just silence, and a single woman kneeling near the altar, eyes closed, breathing like she's somewhere else entirely. You sit nearby, careful not to break the spell. Welcome to the strange, quiet realm of medieval spiritual ecstasy. This isn't the kind born from herbs or fermented ales. This is the high of divine obsession, of relentless fasting, of chanting yourself into a trance. The path less herbal, more holy. Well, sort of. The woman near the altar? She's Sister Beatrix. You learn this from the priest who eventually enters, carrying a cup of thin broth and a furrowed brow. She hasn't eaten since St. Agatha's feast day, he whispers. But she sees the Virgin in her dreams every night? You blink. That was 3 weeks ago. Fasting was a common path to spiritual highs. For many mystics, especially women, it was a way to escape the body, to show devotion, or to bypass the church hierarchy entirely. If men wouldn't listen to your voice, perhaps God would. And if he answered, people started listening. Beatrix isn't alone. She's part of a long tradition of visionaries, saints, and spiritual radicals who believed divine communion required sacrifice. Hunger, isolation, hours of kneeling until your legs forget their job. Saint Catherine of Siena reportedly survived for years on little more than the Eucharist, claiming Christ sustained her. Her followers saw it as proof of sainthood. Modern scholars still argue whether it was faith or untreated anorexia cloaked in holiness. But it wasn't just fasting. Some nuns and mystics would enter trance states through rhythmic prayer, chanting psalms for hours until their voices cracked and their minds slipped sideways. You try it. Just a few Latin syllables over and over. The sound blurs, then echoes. The walls breathe. Your heartbeat syncs with the cadence. You open your eyes. Beatrix is smiling at nothing. Her hands are raised, palms up, trembling slightly. She whispers something. You lean in. Blue fire, she says. And the voice of Gabriel, but he'd looked like a bird this time. You're not sure whether to be moved or mildly concerned. The priest doesn't intervene. He merely watches. These experiences are tolerated, even respected. So long as they don't contradict dogma or get too weird. But they do get weird. Later, another nun takes you aside. She shows you a diary, pages filled with dreams, visions, and cryptic messages that read like divine haikus. One line repeats, "The air turns purple and I feel wings." You ask if she ever used herbs. She hesitates. "We use what grows," she says. "But it is not the herbs. It is the longing." Still, you find dried lavender and vervain beneath her pillow. A dream blend. Back in the chapel, Beatrix is now weeping silently, not in pain, not exactly in joy either. Somewhere in between. A place where words crumble. You sit with her. The candle flickers in rhythm with her breath. You don't speak. Then something strange happens. You close your eyes. No incense, no potion, no wine. Just silence and stillness. And in that moment, you feel it. Not wings. Not Gabriel, but a lightness. A drifting. Like your thoughts are leaves floating gently downstream, bumping softly into things they didn't know they'd forgotten. Historians still debate whether medieval mystics were genuinely experiencing divine revelation, or if they were, knowingly or not, using natural deprivation and ritual to alter consciousness. Maybe they were prophets. Maybe just desperate humans, using the only tools they had to escape a world full of plague, poverty, and perpetual war. But regardless, what they felt was real. And sometimes, that's enough. You leave the chapel with a head full of hymns and a strange calm, buzzing just behind your ribs. A boy hands you a flower as you pass. He says it's from Beatrix. It's blue, delicate, and shaped like a star. You tuck it behind your ear. No one says anything. Not all medieval highs were loud. Some whispered through stained glass and soft prayers. And this one? This one is still ringing in your bones. You follow a cart path down from the chapel, feet still a little unsure. Half in the divine, half in the dirt. The countryside stretches ahead in sleepy greens and browns, stitched with hedges and the occasional wobbling chicken. You're heading somewhere different now. Somewhere rougher. Simpler. You're heading to where the real medieval highs lived. In the muddy lanes, smoky kitchens, and crowded cottages of the peasantry. No flying ointments here. No monastery trances. No golden hashish in the little carved boxes. But don't think for a second they didn't also have their methods. You find yourself in a thatched hamlet where everything smells faintly of turnips and damp wool. Children chase each other with sticks. A woman carries a piglet under one arm and an open bottle in the other. She nods at you like you're expected. You pass by a cluster of laborers drinking something from a shared ceramic jug. One offers it to you. "Wake root broth," he says. "Keeps the bones moving." You take a sip. Bitter. Sharp. It kicks your sinuses like a mule. Someone laughs. "What's in it?" you ask, blinking away tears. "Angelica, lovage, maybe some burnt onion for flavor, and fermented nettle." Right. Flavor, but it works. A few minutes later, your limbs buzz. You feel warm. Alert. Not drunk. More like sharpened. The peasants use this stuff before long days in the fields. It's less about escaping and more about enduring, and sometimes that's the kind of high you need. Historians still debate just how widespread plant-based pick-me-ups were among the poor, especially given how few of them could read or write their recipes down. But what we do know is this. They had access to the land, and the land had tricks. In a smoky cottage nearby, an old woman is boiling something green and suspicious. She waves you in. The fire crackles. Dried herbs hang from the rafters. Her name is Anis. She doesn't ask questions. You point at the pot. "Fermented dock root," she says, "with elderflower and a touch of frog spawn if it's Tuesday." You wait, she laughs. "Kidding about the frog spawn? Maybe." She pours you a cup. It smells like wet hay and hope. You drink. There's a pause. Then a lightness in your spine like someone loosened a knot you didn't know was there. Your vision tilts slightly, not dangerously. just enough to notice that the shadows under the rafters are unusually friendly. "Drink that before dancing," Anna says. "You won't stop till the rooster yells." A lot of peasant concoctions straddled the line between food and potion. Wild lettuce sap, often called poor man's opium, was boiled into porridge or smeared behind the ears. Not strong enough to send you flying, but enough to make aching backs and never-ending winters a bit more tolerable. Others swore by teas made from mugwort and motherwort, good for unquiet minds and wandering thoughts, as one hedge healer scribbled on a piece of bark someone later used as a spoon. And sometimes, just a strong ale laced with the right herbs did the trick. You're invited to sit by the fire outside as the villagers gather for the evening meal. A large pot of pottage bubbles with carrots, leeks, and something that might be nettle, or maybe it just feels like it. Someone adds a pinch of dried yarrow. Another tosses in a handful of dream mint. That last one's not real mint, but it does make you feel like your feet are made of feathers. You learn that certain families keep their own secret blends. Recipes passed down orally, guarded like treasure. Not just for illness, but for dreaming, dancing, and for getting things too heavy for daylight. A young girl, no older than 10, offers you a crude wooden flute. "Play," she says. "It helps the brew." You do, badly. Everyone claps like you're a bard. You wonder if they're just polite or if the nettle tea haze is making your music better than it is. You're not complaining. Later, under the stars, the villagers sing. Not hymns, not courtly ballads. Just humming, rhythmic and earthy, like they're weaving the sounds straight into the soil. A woman beside you explains that when her husband died last winter, she drank foxglove wine and talked to him for hours. She swears it helped her grieve. You raise an eyebrow. Foxglove is extremely poisonous. She shrugs. Just a sip. The right amount lets the heart cry in rhythm. That's both poetic and medically alarming. But that's the pattern, isn't it? In medieval life, where pain was constant and options were few, people learned to walk the line between healing and hazard, between the sacred and the slightly unhinged. These weren't substances of excess or escape. They were tools of survival. They were earned. And while the peasants didn't have gilded banquet halls or monastery libraries, they had the forest, the field, the ditch behind the pigsty where skullcap grew wild if you knew where to look. Historians still argue whether these folk concoctions were effective or simply placebo wrapped in folklore. But after a day of thatched roofs, aching muscles, and pickled vegetables, even a placebo can taste like salvation. You lie back in the grass as the fire burns low. The stars don't shimmer. They breathe. Your thoughts drift, soothed by whatever combination of dockroot, nettle ale, and dream mint is now circulating through your medieval bloodstream. You're not soaring through the cosmos. You're not chatting with saints. But your body, heavy and humming, feels held. And for these villagers who rarely travel more than 5 miles from their homes, who lose children and crops and teeth more often than they'd like, this is the miracle. Not escape. Just ease. The next morning arrives not with birdsong, but with a shriek from someone chasing a loose goat through the barley field. You sit up slowly, straw stuck to your face, the memory of dream mint and dockroot still clinging to your senses like the last threads of sleep. Your limbs ache, but pleasantly, as if your muscles themselves had joined the feast. You stretch, yawn, and then someone calls your name. Well, not your name, exactly. Just a vague wave and a beckoning hand from an old man at the edge of the road. "You," he says. "You look like you've got a strong stomach." That's never a comforting opener. You follow him anyway, curiosity outweighing caution, until you arrive at what can only be described as a medieval surgical pit stop. 2 stools, a bucket, a pile of linen that's seen better centuries, and in the center a slab of dark oak stained and scored from countless episodes of healthcare. You found the barber surgeon. Today's procedure, removing an arrowhead from a groaning knight's thigh. But the real star of the show, the sponge. soaked in wine, vinegar, gallbladder bile, and something herbal you can't quite identify. The assistant squeezes it gently and waves it under the knight's nose. You brace yourself. This is what passed for anesthesia in the Middle Ages. The soporific sponge. A soft cloth steeped in a concoction of poppy juice, mandrake root, henbane, and hemlock. If you were bold. Sometimes wrapped in rose petals. Other times just thrown in a bucket until it smelled ready. The sponge didn't always knock the patient out completely, but it dulled the edges, slowed the panic, made the next few minutes survivable. Occasionally, you get a whiff. It's pungent, earthy, and oddly floral, like a garden that knows too much. Historians still debate whether the soporific sponge was more folklore than function. Recipes vary wildly. Some call for opium poppy. Others include bile from a castrated boar. You know, for balance. The knight inhales. His eyes roll back slightly. Not a full knockout, but he's murmuring to someone named Beatrice. No one here is named Beatrice, the surgeon begins. You look away. Instead, your eyes wander to the apothecary pouch on the surgeon's belt. Inside, you catch glimpses of dried henbane leaves, small chunks of resin, and... Wait, is that an opium poppy pod tied with thread? You ask if he uses them all. He nods. Different blends. For pain, for sleep, for silence. And that's the key. It wasn't always about euphoria. Sometimes the goal was numbness, blankness, oblivion. The medieval body broke constantly through war, plague, childbirth, tooth rot, or just surviving another winter. Pain was a daily guest, and getting high? Sometimes it wasn't a thrill, it was a necessity. You hear stories of soldiers marching with opium pellets tucked in their cheeks, of women giving birth on beds of valerian and wool soaked in wine and wormwood, of elderly peasants chewing wild lettuce until their joints stopped screaming. You're offered a small cup. Not wine, not ale. Something stronger, murkier. A mix the assistant calls the numb kiss. You raise it, sniff, hesitate, then sip. It burns, not with heat, but with weight. Like your insides just took a slow, deep breath. Your fingertips pulse, your jaw slackens a little. The world doesn't blur, but it softens. Sounds become more round, less sharp. You smile without meaning to. You sit on the edge of the slab as the knight is bandaged up. He's snoring gently, dreaming of Beatrice, who may or may not be real. And the surgeon is already cleaning the tools with wine and scolding his assistant for stealing the good vinegar. You stay a while longer, sipping slowly, letting the numbness unfurl. Eventually, a midwife joins the camp, her apron streaked with blood and herbs. She carries her own pouch. Inside, mugwort, honey, a dried toad, and what she proudly calls soul balm. You ask what's in it. Poppy, rose, and a whisper from God, she says. You decide not to press further. She explains how she uses it during difficult births, not just for the mother, but for herself. You can't bring life into the world, she says, without forgetting the smell of death for a moment. That sentence sticks with you, because now, finally, you understand the broader truth. Medieval people didn't seek highs the way we think of them now. They didn't chase dopamine spikes or trendy experiences. They sought escape, yes, but also function, relief, silence, stillness. And sometimes they needed to step away from the screaming reality of their lives long enough to survive them. Even if it meant nibbling on a root that might stop your heart. Even if it meant trusting a sponge soaked in mandrake juice and wishful thinking. Even if it meant forgetting Beatrice was never real. The knight stirs, opens one eye, grunts. Did it work? He slurs. The surgeon pats his shoulder. Still got your leg, mostly. He smiles like that's a blessing. You finish your cup, and you walk away with the taste of numbness still lingering deeper than your tongue. A taste not of oblivion, but of something like mercy. The path ahead winds toward shadow. Not ominous, just quieter. You'll go there next, to the places where madness wasn't medicine, where dancing never stopped, where singing turned into screaming and no one knew whether to exercise or applaud. The road twists gently, away from the tools and tinctures of medieval medicine, into something stranger. Something no sponge or prayer could explain. The air feels off, not foul, not cold, just off, like a breath held too long. You cross into a town where people walk quickly, eyes down, lips moving without sound. No one meets your gaze. Even the dogs look suspicious. A boy whispers as you pass, "They're still dancing." You follow the echo of drums, not cheerful festival drums, but tight, frantic beats, like a heart too fast for its own good. You reach the town square and freeze. Dozens of people are twirling, stomping, flailing. Their feet slap stone, their arms jerk wildly, their faces somewhere between joy and horror. Some are smiling, wide and brittle. Others weep silently as they spin, sweat-soaked and filthy. No minstrels, no audience, no end. Welcome to the dancing plague. It happened, more than once. The most famous in 1518, but there were earlier outbursts. Germany, France, the Low Countries. Entire towns caught up in sudden, uncontrollable dance frenzies that lasted days. Weeks, some danced to death. Historians still argue about the cause. Mass hysteria? Religious mania? Ergot poisoning again? You remember that moldy rye loaf? Wouldn't be the first time dinner launched 1,000 limbs, but this doesn't feel like a trip. It feels like possession. You sit on a nearby bench beside an old woman peeling garlic and muttering curses. They say it's Saint Vitus, she says. He gets inside you, won't stop dancing until your bones snap or your soul gives up. Others say it's grief, or boredom, or heat stroke, or sin. One monk yells at the dancers from a pulpit, insisting that only confession will stop the madness. No one listens. One girl collapses, twitching. Her mother runs to her, sobbing, trying to pull off her shoes. The girl shouts, "Don't touch me! The floor is biting!" Someone else vomits in mid-spin. Another dancer begins humming a hymn, eyes closed, spinning faster. You're not sure whether it's beautiful or horrific, maybe both. You watch a young man slam to the ground, breathing like a bellows. His lips move. You lean in. They won't let me stop. Who? He doesn't answer. He's carried away by relatives who look like they've done this before. You're offered a drink by a townswoman who looks exhausted but kind. It's a mix of honey, hops, and ground valerian, meant to slow the pulse. You sip it, grateful for the bitter calm. Some say healers tried to treat the dancers with music, mirroring the rhythm to dance it out. Others used cold baths, chains, prayer. One town even built a stage for the afflicted to spin themselves into oblivion, like a fevered theater piece. Theories bloom like mold in the cellar. Mass psychogenic illness, some scholars say. A collective escape from crushing poverty and stress. Spiritual rapture, say others. A purge, a penance, a divine seizure. Poison, says the physician scribbling notes beside you. He's sniffing a loaf of rye like it might confess. The truth? No one knows. And then you hear the singing, not from the dancers, but from the nearby abbey. A children's choir, or it should be. But the notes are sharp, off-key, too fast. You creep toward the chapel. Inside, rows of girls singing in perfect chaos. Faces flushed, eyes glassy. Their voices don't stop. Even as one begins coughing, even as another screams mid-verse, then picks up the next line like nothing happened. One girl bites her lip so hard it bleeds, never missing a note. Welcome to another kind of medieval high. The possessed choir. It happened in real life, too. Reports of convents where nuns meowed, barked, laughed uncontrollably, or danced in frenzied circles for hours, sometimes weeks. Often contagious. One abbey's meowing outbreak spread across multiple towns before church authorities cracked down. Were they drugged? Ill? Traumatized? Rebellious? Some modern scholars suggest repressed sexuality, toxic diets, or the pressure of religious life. Others whisper about mercury poisoning from sacred paints. Or fungus. Always the fungus. But here's the wild part. Many of these outbreaks weren't punished. At least not right away. Because if it looked holy, if it seemed like divine ecstasy, it was tolerated. Encouraged even. You sit in the pews, hands on your knees, watching as one girl slumps forward, sobbing and singing at the same time. Another bursts out laughing and immediately collapses. No one intervenes. You feel dizzy just watching. Someone taps your shoulder. A friar with a gentle face. He offers you a cloth soaked in lavender and clove. For balance, he says. You press it to your face. Breathe deep. The singing fades slightly, not in volume, just in weight. You don't feel pulled anymore. You feel grounded, tethered. Outside, the dancers are still going. A mother spins with her toddler strapped to her back. An old man limps in rhythm. A group begins clapping along as if encouraging the madness. And you wonder, were these people high? Possessed? Sick? Or simply finding the only release allowed in a world that didn't let them scream? In a society where joy was rationed, where silence was holy, and where pain was expected, maybe dancing until collapse was the only honest prayer left. You step away slowly. Behind you, the drums pound. The hymns swell. And somewhere in between, something real. Something high and holy and horrifying. You leave the dancing behind, not because you want to, but because your legs are starting to twitch in sympathy. Even now, footsteps echo behind you, phantom rhythms tapping the insides of your skull. It's a sound that sticks. But the road ahead feels quieter. Greener. And then you see it. Low stone walls, careful rows of herbs, and a cloaked figure hunched over a patch of leafy stalks. Welcome to the monastery garden. It's peaceful here. Bees hum, a cat naps in a basket, and the air smells like rosemary, sage, and something faintly spicy like regret stewed in sunlight. The monk tending the plants doesn't look up when you approach. He just says, "Don't touch the foxglove." You weren't going to, but now that he's said it, you really want to. Monastic gardens were the pharmacies of the medieval world. Organized, methodical, and surprisingly potent. Every plant here has a purpose. Healing wounds, easing labor, curing coughs, or, sending your soul on an unscheduled journey. You spot familiar names. Fennel, lavender, mint. Comforting, and then the others. Datra, belladonna, mandrake, henbane, nightshade, the forbidden flowers. All present, all accounted for. Each one tucked neatly into its own corner, with tiny wooden markers that might as well say, "Use with care or die screaming." You kneel beside a patch of blooming belladonna. Glossy leaves, purple-black berries like tiny glass marbles. So beautiful. So extremely not for snacking. Also known as deadly nightshade, belladonna contains alkaloids that disrupt the nervous system. It dilates pupils, slows the heart, blurs the line between dream and death. Still, it had its uses. Diluted and handled properly, it was used in eye drops to make noble women look more alluring. A flirtatious haze, a deadly gaze. Historians still argue whether these plants were truly cultivated for vision-seeking, or whether the spiritual experiences were just a side effect of messing with toxic herbs in a time before gloves were a thing. You wander deeper into the garden and find mandrake, a leafy rosette hiding a root shaped eerily like a human body. Legend says it screams when pulled from the ground. Some even say its scream can kill. That's probably not true. Probably. Still, monks had protocols. Some tied a dog to the root and let it do the pulling. Then they'd plug their ears and pray the poor mutt didn't run straight into the devil's mailbox. You spot a few henbane plants swaying gently. These leaves, when smoked or brewed into a tea, caused vivid hallucinations. Bright lights, false voices, time loops, feelings of floating, or doom. Or both. Sometimes both. The monk finally looks up. "You've been staring too long at the henbane," he says. You blink. He's right. Your pupils feel weirdly open. He leads you to a shaded bench and offers you a cup of something warm, infused with calamus root, chamomile, and a whisper of wild thyme. It brings you back down, gently. You ask him why they grow these dangerous plants. His answer is as soft as it is startling. Because some illnesses don't touch the body. He tells you about Brother Theophilus, who once refused to eat, sleep, or speak after a vision during Lent. No wound, no fever, just a mind somewhere else. They brewed him tea from crushed passion flower, poppy seeds, and a tiny shaving of datura root, just enough to guide his dreams back to his body. It worked. Probably, he did eventually speak again, although now everything he says is in rhyming couplets and he keeps drawing eyes on every surface. The monk chuckles. Still better than silence. You learn that not all monks were so accepting. Some declared these plants witches' tools and burned entire gardens during inquisitorial purges. Others hid their most potent herbs in secret plots behind the cloisters, accessible only to those who knew which stone to push near the sundial. You're not kidding. He shows you the stone. Inside the hidden patch, twisted vines of thornapple, clumps of hellebore, and a tiny field of blue lotus, which was rare even then. The monks kept it for rituals requiring heightened awareness. You ask what that means. He just smiles. You'll know when it happens. You ask if he believes these plants open the mind or simply unhinge it. He plucks a vervain blossom, presses it into your hand, and says, "Depends what the mind was locked for." That sticks. As you leave, he gives you a sachet, dried lemon balm, mugwort, and a single crushed poppy petal. For dreams, he says, or nightmares. Either way, you'll feel something. Back at the garden's edge, you pass a beehive. The bees here are slow, drowsy. You look closer and realize they've been feeding from the datura blossoms. You ask if that's safe. He shrugs. They make mad honey. You blink. Mad honey? Yes, it's real. Bees that feed on certain toxic flowers produce honey that can cause hallucinations, euphoria, even paralysis. In small amounts, it was once used as medicine. In large amounts, let's just say the bees weren't the only ones that got dizzy. You ask if they eat it. He gives you a long look, then hands you a thimble's worth in a carved walnut shell. You taste it. Warm, metallic, a little bitter, like honey that's seen things. You walk away smiling, your mind clearer and cloudier at the same time. And you realize something. Not all highs require flames or feasts. Some come from sunlight, seeds, and secrets whispered by plants with very sharp teeth. The path curls out of the monastery garden and into thicker air. You feel it before you see it. An acrid tang, faint but rising. Smoke, but not hearthfire, a different kind. You follow it past quiet pastures and low hills until a crooked tower looms into view. A weathered sign swings lazily outside the door, engraved with a sun, a serpent, and a triangle. You've found the alchemist. The door creaks open before you knock. A young man with soot-smudged spectacles gestures you inside, barely glancing up from the scroll he's attempting to read while also stirring a bubbling flask. You step into a symphony of glass, retorts, alembics, crucibles. Jars of metallic dust and dried herbs. Shelves labeled in languages half translated and entirely misunderstood. Everything smells like possibility, if possibility also smelled like burning copper and feet. He waves you toward a stool. "Don't touch the mercury," he says, "or the frogs." You weren't planning to. This is the medieval laboratory, or rather the chaotic blend of lab, chapel, and fever dream that was the alchemist's workspace. You thought it'd be more mystical, but it's mostly just hot, cramped, and buzzing with flies. Still, there's something electric in the air, as if the walls remember every failed attempt at immortality. He shows you a flask filled with shimmering purple fluid. Distilled wine vapor, mercury ash, and powdered coral, he says. Elixir of clarity. Or vomiting, can't remember which. He hands it to you. You decline. He shrugs and drinks it himself. After a moment, his pupils dilate. He says, "Ah, yes, clarity. Definitely clarity." Then walks directly into a shelf of codices. You're not reassured. Alchemists in the Middle Ages weren't just chasing gold. They sought transformation. Of matter, of spirit, of self. They believed in as above, so below. The idea that unlocking the secrets of the physical world could elevate the soul. So they inhaled things. A lot of things. Sulfur vapors, lead smoke, arsenic steam, mercury mist. The toxic cocktail list goes on. All in the name of enlightenment. You can't help but wonder how many visions were just the result of prolonged heavy metal exposure. Historians still argue whether these hallucinations were mystical experiences or neurological warnings. One noted alchemist claimed he spoke to the shadow of gold, who gave him instructions in rhyme. Another described floating above his own skull and seeing stars explode into Latin. You wander past a table where a powder has been shaped into a spiral. The apprentice warns you not to breathe too close. It's aqua tofani, a poison so potent that even its smell might whisper treason. You lean back. He shows you their prized possession, a vial of oil of vitriol, sulfuric acid. Distilled from green vitriol and dreams, he says. You nod, pretending to understand. You ask if they ever make anything pleasant. He shows you a bottle of Spiritus Vini Rectificatus, ultra-distilled wine, clear as glass. We drink this when we run out of ideas, he says, or when we get them. He offers you a sip. It burns like divine fire down your throat. A warmth spreads, then shifts, then vibrates inside your skull, like bees arguing in a bell. You smile. He grins, then lights something on fire and walks away. You watch as green smoke pours upward, swirls into a shape that almost resembles a winged lion. You blink. It vanishes. Alchemy wasn't just about chemistry, it was performance art. A little science, a lot of hope, and a dangerous amount of inhaled nonsense. The apprentice hands you a scroll. On it, a diagram of the Philosopher's Stone. At the center, a flower with 7 petals. Around it, symbols of Mercury, Saturn, Mars, and the Moon. He says if you meditate on it while holding the proper tincture, you may see God. Or go blind. You're offered the tincture. It's mostly wine, he assures you. With extras. You ask what kind, he thinks. Antimony, wormwood, gold filings, my uncle's ashes, probably. You don't drink it, but you take the scroll. It feels heavier than paper should. In the corner of the lab, a small vial glows faintly in the dark. You ask about it. The apprentice says it was distilled under a lunar eclipse, using saltpeter, violet root, and tears from a widow. He says it allows lucid dreams. You consider stealing it. You don't. You leave instead, head spinning from fumes and possibilities. Outside, the wind feels clean for the first time in hours. You breathe deeply. It tastes like relief. The alchemist's tower disappears behind you, still smoking, still buzzing. You're not sure what you've learned, but you feel different, like your molecules were rearranged and politely reassembled. And maybe that's the point. The highs of alchemy weren't always about escape. Sometimes they were about becoming, burning away the heavy metals of thought and rising, if only briefly, into something light. You glance back once. The apprentice is waving from the tower window. He's glowing. Or maybe that's just more phosphorus again. Either way, you wave back. Your boots crunch over gravel as you walk back towards civilization. if you could call it that. After alchemists and screaming mandrakes, even a tavern brawl would feel reassuring. But as you crest the hill and see the spires of a walled city rising in the distance, something nags at you. What did all this mean to the law? You've smoked moonblend with witches, swallowed wine laced with opium, and watched peasants boil dreams into stew. But surely someone, somewhere, was keeping a list of what not to inhale, imbibe, or stuff into your boots for later use. You enter through the city gates as a bell tolls above. Not for prayer, for judgment. At the center of the market square stands a wooden platform. Beside it, a cart. Inside the cart, barrels of confiscated items. Some harmless, some not. All banned. A clerk shouts the charges. Possession of a forbidden poultice. Sale of spiced mead with hallucinogenic mushroom. Distribution of herbs deemed inappropriate for piety and posture. The crowd murmurs. You step closer. On display, mandrake roots, jars labeled Devil's Tincture, a pouch of dried henbane, and a sack of eastern resin that smells suspiciously like hashish. The accused is a middle-aged merchant, eyes wild, hands trembling. He insists, it's for healing, for clarity, for the stomach. A robed official scoffs. Then why did your customer try to baptize a chicken in his own bathwater? Fair. In the Middle Ages, laws around mind-altering substances were inconsistent at best, laughable at worst. Many ingredients used in these concoctions were also found in medicinal texts, approved by monks, used by midwives, sold in apothecaries, but add the wrong symbol to the label, mention visions instead of relief, and suddenly you're a heretic. Historians still debate whether these laws were really about health or just about control. After all, who gets to decide what counts as dangerous? The healer in the village? The monk in the garden? The judge who's never tried a spoon of soul balm in his life? It wasn't just church edicts. In some cities, guilds regulated who could sell what. Apothecaries were licensed, herbs were taxed, and selling a root that made your neighbors see angels could land you in a very unpleasant dungeon, or worse. But here's the weird twist. Some highs were quietly allowed. You wander into the upper quarter, past polished doors and silken sleeves. Behind one of those doors, soft music plays. You're ushered into a salon by a young noblewoman with pupils the size of moonstones. She offers you a goblet. Hippocras, she says, with a touch of mandrake and a very small pinch of powdered toadstool. You raise an eyebrow. She grins. No laws up here. The aristocracy could indulge with little fear of punishment. They had private physicians, imported spices, and servants to blame if anything went wrong. If a peasant danced in the street, it was demonic possession. If a duke did it at his garden party, it was a poetic expression of melancholic spirit. You sip. It's sweet. Dark. Slightly crunchy? You don't ask. The room shifts. The rugs breathe. A fresco on the ceiling winks at you. You're starting to notice a pattern. The higher you are in society, the more you can experiment without consequences. A monk in his cell can burn frankincense until he talks to Saint Jerome and be called holy. A farmer who chews too much wild lettuce and forgets his name? Banished. A baroness can get nightly dream massages soaked in poppy oil, while a beggar with the same bottle gets accused of witchcraft. You lie back on a velvet divan as the noble guests around you laugh, sip, and mutter strange poetry into their sleeves. One man is sketching the same spiral over and over. Another woman is writing down every word you say, even though you've said exactly 4. Later, as the haze fades, you find yourself outside, under the torchlight of a city guard patrol. You tense, but they don't arrest you. They nod. One even slips something into your hand, a crumb of honeyed seed cake wrapped in wax paper. You ask what it is. Old family recipe, he says, for sleep or forgetting. You wander off, dazed but unbothered. That's the other thing. The laws were leaky. What was banned in one town was blessed in the next. A substance considered heretical in Burgundy was sold over the counter in Venice. One pope might ban witches' wine. The next would drink it with his advisors, in moderation, of course. A traveling merchant tells you he once sold sleep sticks, little bundles of dried herbs meant to be burned at bedtime. The church banned them in Mainz, called them soul portals. In Florence, he sold out in a week. You reach the edge of the city just as the bells ring again, this time for evening prayer. You pause. You've seen healing, hiding, hysteria, and hallucination. You've seen herbs held under tongues and powders folded into cloaks. You've seen joy, silence, horror, laughter, and something that might have been enlightenment or indigestion. And through it all, a single thread. Everyone's looking for a way out. Or a way in. Whether it was a nun fasting into visions, or a peasant sipping nettle tea to quiet his aching knees, or a nobleman writing poetry to his candle while high on beetle dust wine. The impulse was the same. To lift. To drift. To change shape for a little while. Even if it meant breaking a law that only existed on paper. You turn back to look at the city. There's smoke in the chimneys, laughter in the alleys, and somewhere, someone is heating up a spoonful of something they really shouldn't be messing with. You wish them well, and you keep walking. You walk into dusk, the city lights fading behind you, the ground crunching softly underfoot. There's a breeze now, cooler, quieter. You've tasted 1,000 highs, felt the sting of smoke, the warmth of wine, the hush of poppy dreams. But none of it prepared you for what lies ahead. Because sometimes the most surreal moment isn't caused by a herb, a sponge, or a cursed cheese wheel. Sometimes it's just the air itself, thick with sickness, silence, and fear. You arrive at the edge of a village that doesn't sound like a village anymore. No singing, no market chatter, no clanging pots. Just the low groan of cartwheels and the whisper of feet dragging over stone. The plague has arrived. A black flag flaps limply above the door of a cottage. A man stands outside, gently fanning incense into the street. You look closer. It's not incense. It's juniper, frankincense, myrrh, burning on coals inside a metal censer shaped like a rose. He swings it lazily back and forth. The smoke rises, heavy and sweet. The smell is almost cloying. "Keep the bad air away," he mutters. You nod, though both of you know it won't. Inside the house, someone is dying, maybe multiple someones. You don't ask, but the scent clings to your throat. Too much spice, not enough room. It doesn't clear the air, it clouds it. And that strangely is the point. In plague-stricken towns, perfume became protection. People stuffed pockets, pouches, and masks with anything fragrant. Rose petals, herbs, vinegar-soaked cloths. If it smelled strong enough, maybe it could fend off death. And in those final hours, they didn't reach for clean water or bread. They reached for the scented high. One woman inside lies on a straw pallet. A damp cloth covers her chest, soaked in a vinegar tincture filled with thyme, sage, and camphor. Her eyes flutter. She isn't conscious, not really, but her body breathes a little easier with the scent curling up her nose. Beside her, a young man holds a clay bowl to her lips. Inside, wine laced with opium, saffron, and clove. Not to cure her, to ease the fear, to make the dying feel less sharp. Historians still argue whether this was mercy, madness, or superstition. But in the absence of hope, sometimes comfort is the cure. You sit with them for a while, the scent wrapping around you. You think you hear whispering, but it's just the fire crackling in its corner. Or maybe not. In another room, someone has burned angelica root, believed to be a divine protector against the plague. The smell is sharp and woody. You breathe it in. Your head lightens. One girl kneels by the hearth, crushing petals into a waxy lump. "For my dreams," she says, pressing it to her nose and inhaling. You ask why. so I don't wake up if it happens. You don't know what to say. You walk the street. The smoke is everywhere, curling from windows, smoldering from torches, wafting from handkerchiefs. It's like the entire village is trying to disappear behind a wall of perfume. You reach a makeshift hospital. Inside, two friars move between cots, dabbing vinegar-soaked sponges onto foreheads, whispering prayers, anointing chests with laudanum oil. You recognize the smell. Opium and saffron again? But stronger. They're not easing pain. They're sending people off. You ask one friar what it feels like. He says, warm. Quiet. Like stepping into silk. You stay longer than you intended. Because something about this moment, this final kind of high, is different. There's no laughter, no hallucination, no dancing, just the soft cushion of not feeling. And for the dying, that was enough. One man nearby sucks gently on a cloth filled with hyssop and camphor, lips pale, eyes closed. You hear him whisper a song or a prayer. And for just a second, you understand all of it. The bathhouse smoke, the mushroom wine, the witch's salve, the hemp-laced song, the honeyed herb cake smuggled under a monk's robe. It was never really about getting high. It was about finding a space, any space, between the pain and the panic. To rest, to remember, to vanish just enough to come back whole. Or if not whole, then at least not screaming. You leave the village as bells toll for the dead. And even as the smoke fades behind you, something lingers in your lungs. Not grief, not fear, just understanding. You've seen what they used to climb. And now, it's time to descend. You're back on the road now, where the only sound is your footsteps and the occasional sigh of wind through the trees. The sky is soft, pale, blurring gently between the last edges of twilight and the first promise of night. And as you walk, the world begins to slow. You feel it in your shoulders first, a release, a gentle sag, like the weight you've been carrying through 1,000 strange scenes has finally asked to be put down. Your breath finds its rhythm. In, outside, in, outside. You've traveled through smoky bathhouses and herb-laced feasts, through whispered visions and velvet hallucinations. You've sipped, inhaled, and tasted your way through the blurred edges of medieval reality, where medicine met magic and madness danced with ritual, where people, desperate or daring, found ways to rise above the mud and sickness and sorrow, if only for a moment. And now the night is folding itself around you. Software protective, familiar. Imagine the scent of lavender from a nun's pillow, the clink of a glass in a quiet apothecary, the hum of bees on a flower touched by madness, and far, far in the distance, the last echo of dancing feet. All those sounds drift backward now, fading like candle smoke. The path ahead is quieter, your steps are slower, and the world, after all its strange highs and terrifying lows, feels still. So just rest here a while. Let the warmth of the fire in the bathhouse return to your bones. Let the buzz of valerian and wine soften the edge of your thoughts. And let your breath drift like the last ribbon of incense curling toward the rafters. You're safe now. You've wandered through the wildest corners of history, and you've come back softer, slower, and just a little stranger than before. Let sleep take you now, the good kind, the kind that doesn't need herbs or roots or oils. Just silence, and breath, and time.